So today I have the pleasure of getting to speak with Viktor Farcic. Viktor was formerly with CloudBees and CodeFresh. He's now with Shippa. He's a Docker captain, content creator extraordinaire, a published author, podcaster, video creator on YouTube. If you're interested in any more that he has to say, and I suggest you should be interested, go check him out. Look for Devops Toolkit or Devops Paradox. A couple of great ways to find him, or just look for Viktor Farcic. He may be the one and only in the world. I don't know.
Yeah, there aren't other people that I know of with the same first and last name, so you should find me easily.
Yeah, but thanks for being here today, Viktor.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I've been following you in particular through your YouTube channel, the Devops Toolkit YouTube channel.
Thank you.
Lots of really great content there. And one of the things that, especially looking at your history, you have some of the places you've worked, it's all around that, delivering value. And, so many people are looking at Kubernetes as that, kind of not the base layer, but at least, one of the layers in their delivery of value. And one of the things that I've seen more and more lately are these kind of abstractions on top of Kubernetes. And so I'm kind of, I'm hoping to pick your brain some on, where are those abstractions coming in? What are the problems they're trying to solve? Where are they getting it right? Where are they getting it wrong? And kind of, for the future, what are the ways that people are going to interact with Kubernetes? Or does Kubernetes just disappear and it's just these abstractions on top?
Yeah, so let me go back first a bit in time. Since as far as I know, as far as I've been working in this industry, we always had some form of platforms, right? We had, let's say, Heroku. You can think of Docker as a platform as well, and so on and so forth. Now, what is different today, I think, is the direction from which we approach those platforms. What I mean by that is that if I take Heroku as an example, and I think that Heroku is absolutely amazing, or was, I'm not sure whether it exists still, right? Is that all those platforms started with the idea, hey, how can we simplify things for people? How can we make those things simple? And that sounds amazing. That sounds great. But they all failed, more or less. And the reason why I'm optimistic about Kubernetes is that it takes a different approach. Kubernetes starts with, how can we make this thing robust? How can we make this thing work under all conditions, circumstances? How we can deploy stateful applications, stateless applications, how we can manage infrastructure, how we can expose our services to outside world, and so on and so forth. But that approach that approach is useful only to a selected few people, right? Because if you dedicate most of your time working with and learning Kubernetes, you're golden, it's great, the world is amazing, and all those things, right? But then vast majority of us are not really spending every single minute of our lives learning Kubernetes. You might be a Java developer or JavaScript developer, Python something. You might be working with machine learning, right? There are thousands of different things you might be doing that are not really directly related with Kubernetes. So Kubernetes, at least from my perspective, is failing that group. It's failing 98% of the people. And that's why we need that to convert Kubernetes into a platform. But from the right direction. So we built foundations, which is something that no other platform in the past built, at least not to this level. And now we need to figure out how we can make it disappear, right? And by disappear, I don't mean that Kubernetes will literally disappear, but it will become an implementation detail. Just like today, if you want a VM, you're not really going deep into how hypervisors work. You don't care about those things, right? You go to AWS, you say, I want a VM, you get a VM. You don't know how VMs work, you don't care, but there are VMs behind that magic and many other things. That's where we need to come with Kubernetes. And the best example to me but that covers only a very specific use case, of something like that is Google Cloud Run. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with it or no, right?
Yeah,
But
the
Google Cloud Run
serverless
is
type
like
thing.
that. Exactly. Here's my image, container image, we'll run it. Where will it run? I don't know. I don't care, right? Kind of like, what will it do? I know what it will do. It will scale my application up and down from 0 to something and something else and so on and so forth. But beyond that, I don't know. I don't care. I can specify only the things that matter to me, and this is my image. I would like never to go beyond 20 replicas and things like that, right? But Google Cloud Run is very specific implementation of something. It is serverless that runs only on Google Cloud, and it is using, and behind the scenes, it is using Kubernetes. If you go, and actually, I'm a bit chaotic right now, so I'm going all over the place. But if you go to Google Cloud Run docs, you will hardly see Kubernetes being mentioned over there, right? Because for you as a user, that does not matter. What matters is that Kubernetes is very important for Google in that specific scenario as a provider, right? They need to leverage Kubernetes to be able to deliver to you whatever it needs to be delivered. But you as a user, hey, I don't know, I don't care anymore, right? Type of attitude. And then within the larger companies, we have now those two groups of people. You have, and I'm now talking about mid to large size companies. What I'm about to say does not necessarily apply to small companies, but there is a group of people, minority, that says, hey, I need to understand how this works because I need to manage the system. And it cannot be just any ingress. It cannot be any service mesh. It cannot be any type of external disk drives and so on and so forth. And those are the people who go deep into Kubernetes, right? And then there is everybody else for us. And for everybody else, we need some kind of a platform. And that's where I can do a shameless plug like Shippa, right?
Yeah.
I joined Shippa a couple of weeks ago to begin with. I don't do marketing pitches, just to make it clear. But I joined Shippa precisely because I think that's the next thing we need to do as industry, as community. We need to build that layer now. Okay, we have a foundation. And people freak out when I say foundation. Kubernetes is not something that anybody should be using. It's a foundation to build platforms, to build awesome things on top, right?
Yeah.
I already even forgot your question, what we started talking about.
No, that's all the types of stuff that I think is very, very useful to think about, you look at some of the platforms of the past, like I still use, the idea of Heroku more than interacting with it day to day, but the idea of Heroku is still very powerful. This idea of you just give it your Java app, or you give it your, Python or whatever, and it just does everything for you. Like, that's amazing. I think one of the things that a lot of those past platforms focused on, that I think you talked about Kubernetes as differentiating, is they were very much about constraints, which could make you very productive and very effective if you could stay within those constraints. But Kubernetes, you've got such a wide, ecosystem of things you can do, and it's ever expanding with all the operators and enhancements and all these, custom resource definitions. But I definitely feel, you're right onto it. Most people not only don't need to be in Kubernetes, like shouldn't be, because that's not necessarily where they're going to deliver value. You want to, a lot of the developers, they want to be on that, what's the minimal amount of effort I can put into around getting my business logic deployed, getting this, differentiating thing out there. And, for myself, I work as a platform engineer right now. So we're building the platform on top of Kubernetes, and, I get to see some of the rough edges of Kubernetes. And, that's some stuff where, talking about those kind of custom built platforms that go on top of Kubernetes, that are aware of Kubernetes, but they simplify a lot of that stuff, to make it easier to manage, like policy, and you mentioned storage and all these things where, especially if you have government, or legal requirements, just to kind of give an example, I tried to use kubeadm to set up the Kubernetes cluster that we use. And, as far as the CIS benchmark for, hardening it and all that stuff, it just, in the end, we ended up, doing, the manually pulling down the Kubernetes binaries and configuring everything by hand.
But like what you said about kubeadm, whether I would agree with your statement or not depends a lot in the point of time we are talking in.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody asked me today, hey, I'm going to create my Kubernetes cluster with kubeadm, I would say, I don't know, you're a masochist. Why would you do that, right? Kind of like, why do you want to hurt yourself? However, if you told me that same story like 4 years ago, I would say, yay, go for it, right? Because at that time, we were not mature enough around Kubernetes to have better ways, many better ways than kubeadm.
Mm-hmm.
But today, kubeadm to me is like the other day I spoke actually with Kelsey Hightower, and he mentioned that it was a public conversation. He mentioned his Kubernetes the hard way, right, doing with kubeadm, and he mentioned that hey, he needs to update that to keep up to date and relevant and stuff like that. And I asked him, man, are you doing that same thing? Are you using kubeadm and doing it the hard way as in a book you're describing? He said, no, of course not. Of course not. I'm not doing it anymore. Kind of like I was doing it 4 years ago. I don't do it anymore because why would I? You can, if you need a cluster, you can choose OpenShift, you can choose Rancher, you can go with the cloud, AKS something. I mean, the VMware has Tanzu, right? Kind of, your job is more to choose which way to do it fits you better than struggling with kubeadm.
Yeah. So speaking of making your choices, when, as you've seen, the rise of, in particular, serverless, where there's less thought ahead of time about where it's going to run, how it's going to run. I guess I'm kind of curious, do you see people adopting that and getting to the point where now they're really thinking about what the performance characteristics of their apps are, where they actually see, the dollars and cents, more clearly of, how well they can perform?
I see people thinking about it rather than doing it. To begin with, I think that there is a misconception that hey, everybody is using Kubernetes. That's absolutely not true. Everybody's using cloud. It's absolutely not true. Now, almost every company is using Kubernetes, but for a fraction of their workload, right? If you go to a big bank and you say, are you using Kubernetes? Yes. What is the percentage of the workload running in Kubernetes? 2%, right? So we're just starting there. And serverless is going to be almost certainly a significant percentage of our workloads in not today, but in the future. However, when I say, and I like to clarify this with people, when I say serverless, I don't mean functions as a service.
Right.
Functions as a service is just, to me, one flavor of serverless that will never, ever, ever become a dominant way of doing stuff. It's just too constrained. It's almost silly. But serverless, as if I do not really care where this is running. And it's not my job to watch it like stare in front of the monitor instead of looking at Netflix and say, oh, now I should scale up, I should scale down. No, kind of those things needs to be automated. And from that perspective, serverless to me is just another layer of simplification of how applications should run, right? Serverless is about, hey, this is the code of my application, or this is a container image, run it. And we are getting there. I don't think that we are there yet, at least not in a level of percentage of adoption and how many solutions we have, but we're definitely getting there. We are getting to we are going to get to the same, from user perspective, from developer perspective, to the same point where people were with Heroku. We are getting to the same point. The major problem with Heroku is that Heroku was too early. That's my theory. We as industries in general, we were not ready for Heroku when it emerged, but now we are. I'm certain of that.
I think Google App Engine was even more stark of it was kind of ahead of its time in a lot of ways.
Exactly, and that's one of the things I learned over once I switched completely to work for rather software vendors than third-party companies, or that it's just important to figure out when it's the right moment than to have the best thing.
Yeah, very true.
If you think about it, Mesos was ahead of the time as well. Kind of what Mesos was doing was, I mean, my mind was, I was freaking out when I was introduced to Mesos, and now it doesn't exist. It was too early.
Yeah, I remember playing around with Mesos and Marathon, comparing it to this new thing of Kubernetes, and I was like, well, but the Kubernetes things it's not just Kubernetes. You've also got to adopt containers, and Marathon seems more like an easier sell because I can just tell them, well, you've already got Spring Boot apps, just put those there. And
exactly, and it was already used by some really big companies in a really large scale. Well, Kubernetes at the time was kind of entering the scene.
Yeah, but it is interesting to look back in hindsight and see how it all evolved, and Kubernetes has been pretty bulletproof for a while, even with, Swarm trying to come in, and, people have definitely seems like they've picked a winner.
Yeah, it's actually, it's not that people pick the winner. Software vendors pick the winner. That's the major differentiator, I think, because what Mesos was lacking and Docker Swarm was lacking and Heroku is that the rest of the industry did not rally behind it, right? With Kubernetes, it is different. I would actually dare you to find me a single software vendor that is not investing majority of its resources into Kubernetes right now. There is no software company that is not heavily investing in Kubernetes. And that means that it cannot go away, right? Because simply the investment is so huge that it cannot go away. The only way is to just keep making it better.
Yeah. And so with the investments in Kubernetes, I think we both kind of agreed, if the company is directly interacting with Kubernetes, you're probably going to have some people who are your Kubernetes focused experts, and then somewhere else you've got your developers, and again, I know we're both familiar with Shippa, to varying degrees. But you look at things like that where it feels like it's trying to smooth out that interaction, that kind of, what do I want to say, like it tries to make some of the responsibilities more clear, so it becomes more obvious where those potential rough edges are, so that you can where to prepare for different handoffs and different collaboration. I guess where do you see some improvements around how that kind of the true DevOps culture comes into some of this interaction with your platforms?
Yeah, so I believe that the only way to really succeed these days is that everybody is providing a service to somebody. That's a golden rule. Now, developers are providing service to your external users usually. I don't know if if you have an online website, something like that, developers users are users of that website. Now, for people on the right, users are developers. So, and that's very important in terms that when understanding what you're kind of choosing and where we are going, you cannot have neither group taking ownership in a way that the user is not recognized. And what I mean by that is that developers cannot just pick any random tool that they will use to deploy their stuff, for a simple reason, because that's not their focus, that's not their expertise. You don't really know whether it's better to use Istio or Linkerd.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that? Unless you really spend a couple of weeks working with it, at least as a minimum. I'm being very optimistic right now. On the other hand, people on the right, like operators, sysadmins, SREs, DevOps, whatever, I don't know what people call themselves today anymore. They need to enable developers to be able to be fully autonomous with their applications, and that means deploying as well. What we cannot continue doing anymore is I'm a developer, I give it to you, you deploy somewhere. And then you're a bottleneck. And then there are 50 other developers asking you the same thing, and we are all waiting for something, right? Or the same thing, if I'm a developer, I cannot open a Jira. I can, but I do not want to open a Jira ticket so that you create a cluster for me, right? So your job, and I'm using you as a guinea pig right now, right? Your job is to enable developers. Everybody's job is either to serve the end users or to enable developers to do their job. Maybe it sounds a bit radical, but that's the thing, right? So at least from my perspective, which might not be shared by everybody in Shippa, is that we need to do precisely like that, right? Create a platform that will allow operators, sysadmins, to create means for developers to be fully autonomous and among other things, to deploy stuff. Right. So you as an operator, you might choose, hey, I think that those should be the security restrictions. That should be the service mesh. It should be used and stuff like that. And then developer comes and says, I want to run my application. Kind of like click this button or execute this command, and my application is there up and running. Right. So you're enabling a developer to be autonomous without developers spending 7 years learning, in this case, Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And that's essentially my version of what we're trying to do with Shippa, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I see a couple ways where I see that kind of break down, or at least in the past and maybe even the present as well, is I feel there are still some people who have that fear of, well, if I let the developer click the button, what if something bad happens? And so that's kind of one side of it. And then another thing I thought of, which is maybe not completely related to that, but you got me thinking about it, is, when you think of our external customers, end users of products that come out of different companies, sometimes we have whole teams responsible for, interacting with those customers, seeing how happy they are, putting together surveys and A/B testing and whatever else. But I haven't seen that. And, maybe it's just the size of companies that I've been with, but I haven't seen that in a company or at least that level of engagement for trying to find out, as a platform operator, my customers, the developers, what do they really need? What do they really want? What are the things that would make them, have less toil in their life?
Yeah. But kind of like, you cannot know what they really need, what they really like, if we are all into different silos and kind of like working for our own objectives, right? If and the only really reasonable objective for any company is to deliver features to the end users as quickly as possible, right? But when we split it into different groups, departments, then hey, my objective is, if I'm an operator in a separate department, my objective is for my system never to fail, always to be up and running. And then developer, my objective is to publish new features every 3 minutes. And either of us can accomplish our objectives only if the other group doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Kind of like, my system will always be stable if nobody deploys anything. And and developer would deploy every 3 minutes, even if that thing doesn't work, because I delivered the feature, right?
Yeah.
And the only way to accomplish that is I believe, going back to what I previously mentioned, kind of like, you're not working for your objectives, you are actually fulfilling the needs of somebody. You have a customer, your customer is a developer, developer's customer is the end user, and so on and so forth. But then we come into some kind of strange situation that what you mentioned before, kind of like how can I know that that developer will not push a button which will result in something wrong? And I could counter argue to say, hey, if AWS is in my specific case serving the same purpose as having a sysadmin, the SRE department or whatever, how do they manage that? They're allowing me to click a button. So if you are between me and servers and you're not Amazon, you still need to give me that same service. Kind of like, why would you be any different? Why would you give me any different logic? I'm not saying the level. I know that infrastructure department in a company cannot have the same resources as AWS, but the logic is the same. You give me the button. I want the button. And here's the thing. The question of how do I know that the developer pushing that button will not do something wrong is a very, very wrong question. Because if this team owns this application and that team has the responsibilities beyond that application, then if that team pushes the button and something bad happens, it's that team's responsibility, not yours, right? Your job is to make sure that that button works. And if somebody pushed the button and that button did what it's supposed to do, but that's not what that person needs, then that's that person's problem.
Yeah.
Kind of, I cannot blame Amazon if I push a button, say, give me T2 Nano, and that doesn't have enough capacity. I don't blame Amazon for that, right?
Right.
It's not their problem.
Yeah. 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 I think a lot of the resistance that I see is, it's around, what that button can do. And people, I think there are people who, true or not, they think that they know something that the button pusher might not know. And sometimes it's because they haven't, taken the effort to share that knowledge, to share the concerns of, hey, these are the types of security things you should watch out for. These are the types of, performance things you should watch for, storage things, whatever. And that's where I think the, having the button, a single button, and having that button with a lot of smarts behind it to maybe look for certain things, man, there are so many just crazy capabilities you can have between different deployment styles and such. You can get a whole lot of insight, but I think the most important thing to me is about the auditing, not necessarily to blame, but to be able to know what happened and to be able to teach and improve for the next time.
Exactly. But all those things are almost irrelevant for the bash. All the examples that you said, or most of them, are irrelevant for the button pusher.
Mm-hmm.
That's much more important for the person who creates the button. So if you're the one giving me the button and auditing is very important, then you make sure that that button does the auditing. You cannot expect from me, and I'm focused on writing Java code, something, to understand the intricacies of security, this or that. All those things needs to be baked in. I mean, I'm using a word button as hypothetical thing. It can be more than one button, right? But if I go back to Amazon example, right? I cannot specify any VM I want size. They made sure that I have the safe options to click. I mean, relatively safe within reason, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the kind of the hidden tensions are the ones where it's not the button itself. It's not the people who created the button. It's not the person who's going to click the button. Sometimes it's the people who the button pusher is looking to say, is it okay? And then they look to the other people. Is it okay? Is it okay? Is it okay? And that's where I feel like I spend a lot of my time is trying to build that confidence in some of the other people who are they're not directly involved with the thing, but they're the one who, is on the phone with the customers, and they're the one who is doing other things, and they have fears. And so it's trying to, make them feel better about, no, actually, so backing up for just a second, we have been using Kubernetes at my current client for, going on 2 years here. And we've been doing deployments that whole time. And yesterday, there was an emergency where, and because there's still primarily off hours deployment, it's the throw up the maintenance pages. And some of that has to do with some of the downstream systems that are, not in Kubernetes and such, but that's kind of the normal way. But we do occasionally say, hey, you know what, for this Kubernetes thing, we don't need to take a full outage in order to, spin up new pods with a slightly newer version of this app or whatever. But still, every time that we do it, you kind of re-explain, no, it's okay. There will be no downtime. There will be no outage, and you go through you send them to the wiki page that has the animated GIF of, look, this pod comes up, this one comes down, this one comes up, this one comes down. But that's been kind of hard to build that confidence, even though it feels like we're doing the same thing. We've been doing it. It's been successful.
Because I feel that many people overlook the importance of enabling others rather than doing something, right? And enabling others, among other things, means, okay, it's okay. I would rather sit with you for a week to enable you to do something than continue spending another year of doing something for you, right?
Yeah.
And part of enabling is that button that we mentioned like 1,000 times so far, but it's also about education and then sitting with the person. Okay, so those are the options. If you choose A, this will happen. If you choose B, this will happen. This is how scaling works, and so on and so forth. And those things are extremely important, because at the end of the day, if you don't enable each other, then because everything is so interconnected that without enabling everybody to know sufficient amount of information about everything, then our specific jobs will suffer. Like a good example is, if you don't explain how, and I'm talking about high level now, I'm not talking about all the details, everything. If you don't explain how scaling works, then whomever is writing code of application will not do it in a way that scaling can be leveraged. All right, you're going to create sticky sessions within your application, and that will prevent you from actually having no downtime deployments, which
right.
to a person who doesn't understand, to whom you didn't explain how the things work, will not even see the connection. Kind of like, what's the connection between you not producing downtime and me having sticky sessions? Kind of like, it's not an obvious connection. So it's so much more important enabling others to do their work than doing the work for others, I guess.
Yeah. And I mentioned your Devops Toolkit YouTube channel, and man, you cover so much stuff there. There is just quite a breadth of content there. And I think most of the things that I see pop up in my feed, it's like, oh yeah, I've heard of that thing, or I'm vaguely aware of it. But how do you kind of keep on top of the things and get that kind of deeper knowledge, where you can actually share about it?
To begin with, I don't sleep much. And one of these days, my wife is going to divorce me because I'm not spending much time outside this area over here, right? But aside being a workaholic, it really depends on what you choose as being your profession or career, right? For many years now, I intentionally chose that my contributions to a company I work with is more that horizontal understanding of a bit of everything, so that I can connect the dots between things, than being an expert in something. So basically, if you take any of those videos, right, that I covered, you can easily find a person who knows more about any of those topics than me, kind of. But that's because my focus is more about connecting the dots, understanding how all different pieces fit together. And then I happen to always choose companies that will allow me to do things like that, and then during weekends I just translate my work experience, let's say, into video or something like that. But it's more like focus, right? I cannot say that I spend more time figuring out things than, let's say, a Java developer. It's just that a Java developer might be focused only on Java, while I'm superficially focused on many different things.
Yeah.
I mean, superficially is a strange word, but
yeah, I mean, that's kind of the approach I like myself too. You know, I started in development and was a Java developer, and yeah, I never was the guy who understood everything about, oh yeah, this is why you should use this type of list here because of the way the memory management is. And I'm just like, yeah, but how can we deliver things faster? How can we, leverage these other tools out there? And so, yeah, head in the clouds before there was a cloud.
Kind of probably the main thing that shaped my current situation or what I'm doing is laziness. And honestly, I'm not exaggerating. Kind of like 15 years ago, I made it my mission for me to work less. And that resulted in, hey, I need to automate the tests. I cannot do this anymore. Kind of like, hey, I need to automate deployments. I cannot do this anymore and stuff like that. So I have the theory that people who tend to get out of their comfort zones are normally lazy people who just want to remove the burden of doing something from their backs.
Yeah, automation has always been the draw for me. And for the longest time, I've joked when people ask me, what do you do? I always say, as little as possible, because my goal is to automate it.
Yeah, it kind of, I will be maybe a bit offensive now, but I don't understand how can somebody be more interested, let's say, in doing the same thing every single day than playing with something new frequently, right? Kind of, let's say, if and I'm inventing now the cases, if I'm a tester who is executing the same set of manual test cases over and over again every week, the same thing, isn't it more interesting to kind of like remove that from your tasks, automate it, so that you can spend that time doing something, whatever interests you? Kind of like, doesn't matter, because once you remove that from reduce those 8 hours a day to 7 hours a day, then you have, to 1 hour a day, then you have 7 hours to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Kind of like, I mean, when I say whatever you want, I don't mean necessarily 7 hours of being on Facebook. I mean, whatever you want within the tasks of the company. You can choose what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are some people who I know they like the repetitiveness and lack of work, or I don't want to say lack of work, but the lack of mental exertion for things. Because there are people who their job is their job, and then their hobbies and things are completely different.
Yes.
Yeah,
and I understand that, and I respect that. And honestly, to be honest, I often kind of like wake up in the morning and kind of like, hey, can I just do something that is not really requiring my brain to work? And kind of like, it's do something that I already did 1,000 times before. But the problem is that that's very dangerous. You can easily be kicked out of your job.
Yeah.
Like, like, I don't know anymore, 20 years ago, let's say, when I was doing websites, with animated GIFs and some HTML and all those things. Now, if I stayed at that, I would be completely out of job years ago, because whomever needs that type of service goes to WordPress.
Yeah.
For free, or for $20 a month, or whatever. And there are other services. And the same thing, like, let me think about another example, right, of doing the same thing over and over again. Like, I don't know if you had in the past, or maybe you still do, a person who is dedicated only to merge branches.
Oh, I was that guy for a while.
Okay, there you go, right? But if now that becomes comfortable to do, to know what to do, but eventually, assuming that you're not that guy anymore,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
eventually you would be out of your job if you
Yeah.
stayed only that.
Yeah. I used to do that. It was, I want to say a long time ago, but yeah, it was, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, 6 years ago. But yeah, and yeah, there was, you felt in the moment, because that was the way you did things. You're like, oh, I'm really good at this, because I know that what they really were trying to do here is, they renamed this function, and I know that, but Subversion doesn't know that. So I'm going to do this. But then, yeah, especially with, Git becoming more popular, and, not really, and it's not even really Git itself, it's all the tooling around Git. Again, I think that's one of those things where it was the vendors that really, picked that as the thing, and you get the different ways of using it. And all of a sudden it's, well, you don't see merge conflicts that much anymore. I think out of the last month, I've seen 1 or 2 merge conflicts in Bitbucket,
Exactly. So, and it's kind of sounds offensive, as if, somebody might interpret what I just said as if you were doing unnecessary job in the past, and that's not the case. Doing those things like 8 years ago, or in the past, that was extremely useful. It's just that it's not anymore.
Yeah.
And that part of it might not be useful in the future is very important for us to think about before we go completely into the comfort zone.
Yeah. And that's something where, thinking back, it's very easy now to say, well, the reason that I was having to do those branch merges was because there was a different branch to be built for each environment. And that's a bad idea. And there's also, people are building on all these tons of branches, maybe trunk-based development is what they should have been doing. But sometimes it's hard in the moment to recognize, maybe rather than focusing on getting really good at doing what I'm doing, maybe I should look at how I make it not a problem that exists at all.
Exactly. And that's challenging. I see that in every single company, including the one I work here, right? Kind of, it's very challenging. We all have deadlines. We all need to do something for yesterday. And it's very challenging to kind of figure out when to stop doing what has immediate value and spend time on doing something that will potentially have value in the future. And I'm incapable very often to find that balance, really.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it takes a good employer to recognize that, this thing that may sound completely out there, may sound completely different. It's actually worth letting somebody look into it. It's worth letting them, spend some time that may result in, oh, look, we've got this brand new way of doing things and it's way better. Or it may result in, that turns out that in hindsight, that was a waste of time, but we learned that that's a waste of time.
Yeah, but ultimately, it's all our individual responsibility to figure those things out, not for the sake of benefit of the company, for the sake of your personal individual benefit. You do not want to be in 2021 DB2 administrator, because if that company goes down, kind of like, you will not find a job, at least, especially if you're a principal something, right?
Yeah.
So I like to think that we should all be motivated by our personal individual selfishness, which happens to benefit the company, not the other way around.
I guess to drill in, I know we're kind of coming up on the time, but a lot of the people who are part of the Lansing DevOps meetup, they are people who I think the majority are probably in more of an operations focused role. So they know the servers, they know the networks, but Kubernetes is a bit mysterious to them, and maybe they want to learn more about it. I know you've evaluated several of the tools for getting started. What are some pros and cons of the different ways to kind of get that home cluster, or would you not even recommend that at all?
I mean, for home cluster, I mean, yes, you mean kind of like for practicing on my own, on my laptop and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's K3D today. K3D is absolutely awesome because it's very small, it's very fast, and you know, speed is very important because what you ultimately want to do is to be able to create something, do something in that something, and then destroy something, everything you created, and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. But also, you know, I'm doing less and less things on my computer. If you want to practice Kubernetes, you got to open your private personal account in Google Cloud. And I mean, same thing applies everywhere else. You will get $200 if I'm not mistaken. So it's been a while, right? And for $200, you can practice Kubernetes in Google Cloud for months. For months, as long as you destroy things when you're finished.
Yeah.
So it's going directly to cloud might be just as good or even better option than locally.
Yeah,
and it's free. It's really, I mean, it's not free forever, but it's going to be free for enough time for you to start moving from I'm practicing and learning to I'm adopting.
Well, as long as you're making sure you're killing those resources and, you know, not spending money when you're not using it, you know, and if that helps you get a job where you're getting more money, well, even if you pay at that point, the net would be free, right?
Yeah. And that's kind of, but killing resources is, you know, those are the things that you want to practice because those are the things that you will be doing for real, right? You want to have a cluster of 100 nodes that are always 100. You want to go up and down. You want to be able, if something goes terribly wrong, you want to be able to recreate that cluster somewhere else and so on and so forth. And then you jump into, hey, maybe, you know, you go to Google Cloud, you click 3 buttons, you create a cluster, and then you do something, you destroy the cluster, and then tomorrow, you don't go to Google Cloud to click those buttons. You say, hey, maybe today I should learn Terraform.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the right thing to do it because it's going to make me faster.
Yeah. Well, and just real quick before we wrap up, I just want to ask you, do you have anything, you know, that you're excited to share, anything coming up that people could find through any of your venues that you have there?
Yeah, I mean, I will, a lot of my focus outside of the videos I'm making, which are completely random, is going to be around ship and catch. So what I find interesting happens to be what we are doing right now as a company. So I will probably be managing catch part of the story myself. So I plan to turn it upside down.
Yeah, and definitely anybody who has not been completely in love with the experience of writing and managing Helm charts should check out Catch.
Yeah, I mean, Catch has a way to go, to be honest, and there are many things that we should do and add. But so here's the thing, and what we're trying to do really, and this is not only Catch and Shipa. There are other products. We are not the only one, but for us to adopt Kubernetes, we need to move to the place where we start defining applications and not Kubernetes resources. Because it doesn't make sense for a person, if I want my application running here, it makes no sense for me to think about ingress, to think about virtual services and this and that, right? And long before Kubernetes, we were getting to the place where this is my application, right? What is my application? It is this container image. It is this, I want to expose it on this domain, you know, like 5, 6, maybe 10, 20 lines. It could be even 100 lines. I'm not against having many lines that define an application. I'm more against not having a definition of the application, which might sound strange, kind of when I'm saying that. But if you work with Kubernetes, you quickly realize that Kubernetes is not allowing you to specify application. It allows you to specify something that is closer to infrastructure resources than application.
Yeah. well, it's kind of the difference between having Terraform defining all these things that go together logically versus just a bunch of disparate resources. You don't necessarily know, what's this IP address? What is this thing? What's this network? What's this subnet?
Exactly. And that's why I think that Helm and customers, for example, they will continue being very useful for system level sysadmins, right? Operators, whatever we call ourselves. But we need to switch away from Helm customize to a different format for everybody else.
Yeah.
I'm mentioning that because you mentioned Helm a few minutes ago. I don't even remember in which context, to be honest.
Yeah. No, I've seen some of the comparisons between Helm and Catch, and even that idea of, because I think you're right in that's one of the things that's missing in a lot of the especially if you're looking at just Kubernetes YAML, is there's not the glue, there's not this is all one logical unit. These are all things working together to deliver value within a certain domain or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I definitely appreciate your time. I thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I'm excited to share a conversation with the Lansing DevOps meetup. And I look forward to seeing whatever content you have coming next.
Yeah, and I have a blank check from my company. If anybody is interested in Catch Shippa, without me trying to sell you anything, you can contact me and we can have a some kind of screen sharing demo type of session or whatever can help you.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day.
You too.
All right, thanks.